in Malang and has become one of the leading universities in Indonesia. As a part of Universitas Brawijaya, the Faculty of Engineering plays an important role in advancing the engineering field through education, research, and community service.
Faculty of Engineering Universitas Brawijaya is armed with a global vision to become innovative, collaborative, and competitive to face challenges in the Industry 4.0 era. We provide higher level education with excellent quality to prepare graduates with eminent engineering skill, entrepreneurial skill, and of noble characters. Emphasizing the importance of global cooperation, we focus our research and community service activities on contributing to the national development of the Republic of Indonesia and improving the living standard of people and humanity in general toward the achievement of Society 5.0.
To ensure harmonization between work units, achievement of optimal performance, and recognition at the national and international levels, the Faculty of Engineering always implements an internal quality assurance system, which includes the establishment, implementation, evaluation, control, and continuous improvement of our programs, in accordance with the national standards of higher education. We always ensure that the quality of education is excellent through targets of national and international accreditation. Currently, 88% of our undergraduate programs have been accredited A by BAN-PT, and 2 study programs have been internationally accredited from AUN-QA and IABEE. Every year, the Faculty of Engineering accepts around 1,300 students who will study at 8 undergraduate programs, 1 diploma program, 6 master programs, 3 doctoral programs, and 1 professional program. We have professors and associate professors among lecturers with excellent reputation in scientific research and publication. There are also 65 laboratories to support educational and research activities by the lecturers and students. We are committed to continuing to improve the competence of lecturers and students, especially in facing the era of digitalization. The 9 departments under the Faculty of Engineering are Civil Engineering Department, Mechanical Engineering Department, Water Resource Engineering Department, Electrical Engineering Department, Architecture Department, Urban and Regional Planning Department. Industrial Engineering Department. Chemical Engineering Department. Engineering Profession Program. The Faculty of Engineering provides facilities to support the academic atmosphere, including adequate classrooms, comfortable discussion rooms, libraries, worship places, canteens, sports centers, and student activity centers. We believe that the Faculty of Engineering will further develop through collaboration with various stakeholders, through student exchange programs, double degrees, split programs, visiting professors, research collaborations, and international conference collaborations. Every year, lecturer achievements in the form of patents for research innovations are increasing. Students have also made proud achievements at the national and international levels. With a spirit of innovation and collaboration, the Faculty of Engineering, Universitas Brawijaya, will work hard to present the best achievements for the sustainable development of the Republic of Indonesia.
Satu, dua, tiga, teknik.
Visit us at www.technic.ub.ac.id.
The Honorable Vice Dean for Academic Affairs, Faculty of Engineering, Universitas Brawijaya, Doctor of Engineering Insinyur Indradi Wijatmiko, ST, Master of Engineering Prac, Vice Dean for General Finance and Human Resources Affairs of Faculty of Engineering, Universitas Brawijaya, Insinyur Ismu Rini Dwi Ari, MT, PhD, the Head of Water Resources Engineering Department, Dr. Insinyur Runi Asmaranto, ST, MT, IPM. Distinguished guests from IHE Delft Institute for Water Education, Mr. Ali Dasgai, the Associate Professor of Coastal Engineering and Port Development, and Dr. William Kirby, the Senior Lecturer in Flood Resilience. And online and offline participants, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A very good afternoon to all of us. It is such an honor for me, Miko, for finally meeting you today and welcoming you here in Professor Insinyur Suryono Auditorium, the Faculty of Engineering, Universitas Brawijaya, on June 24, 2022, to have a guest lecture on managing coastal and pluvial flood risk in the cities in a very healthy state, I believe. Okay. Today's guest lecture will be broadcasted live through our YouTube channel in 1, 2, 3 technique. In short, 1, 2, 3 technique. Okay. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, before we proceed to our main agenda today, I would like to ask all of participants who is attending in this auditorium, to please stand up and sing along to Indonesian anthem, Indonesia Raya. Please rise. Thank you. Be seated. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Moving forward, now we are going to listen the opening and welcoming speech from our Dean, the Faculty of Engineering Universitas Brawijaya, which will be represented by our Vice Dean for Academic Affairs, Doctor of Engineering Insinyur Indradi Wijatmiko. Dr. F. Engineering Indradi, time is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear my college, Bu Dr. Ismurini, Dr. Runi, Dr. Doni, Dr. Ming, Dr. Bambang, and also all the participants in here. And I would like to give a special welcome to our guest speakers, Professor Ali and also Dr. Williams. Thank you for joining us here. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah, it's very a great moment for us here, especially even though we are still in the, I could say, end of the pandemic. Yeah, we hope that this will be the end of the pandemic. And we held our first guest lecture, even though it's still a hybrid. So I'm very grateful that we can also meet again now. So it's already after 2 years that we don't have this kind of guest lectures attending in this hall room. Now we have it. And also today, basically we have a semester break, but we still have so many students that can attend in here. Thank you very much for your participations. Today is a guest lecture about the managing costs and pluvial flood risk in the cities. This is actually one of the programs that Professor Ali and Dr. Williams came here. Is collaborations between the Department of Water Resources. So we have kind of teaching, or what we call it, tailor-made training in the department. So I'm very grateful that even we are finished with the time tailor-made training, we still have these guest lectures. These guest lectures is very important for us. So we have our students not only from the undergraduate students, but also from the postgraduate students. There is a master students and also the doctoral students come here, because we know that Indonesia has been known as the second largest coastal area. So this is a very important for us to maintain about the risk, and also we know that Indonesia has two seasons, dry and rainy seasons. That's why we have so many problems with flooding. Today we are going to learn about that. We are very grateful that two of our best guest lecturers come here and share their knowledge. Okay, without further ado, thank you very much for your coming, and let's enjoy these guest lectures. Have a good day. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Indradi. Once again, please give a big applause to Mr. Indradi. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, online and offline participants, now we are going to our main session, which is the guest lecture on managing coastal and pluvial flood risk in the city, which will be led by one of our lecturer, that is Mr. Bambang Winarta, ST.MT PhD, from our International Relations Office, the public lecture, and together with two our greatest speakers today. And please give a big applause to Mr. Ali Daskaib and Mr. William Verbeek. Please, I ask for Mr. Bambang, Mr. Ali, and Mr. William to please come forward to the stage to have the main session shortly. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, please sit back and enjoy this discussion. And please, the time is yours, Mr. Bambang.
Okay, once again, good afternoon, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay, the Honorable the Vice Dean for Academic Affairs, Dr. Indradi Wijatmiko, and then Dr. Ismu Rini Duyari, the Vice Dean for General Financial and Human Resource Affairs, and then the Head Department of Water Resources Engineering, where I working in, Dr. Unias Maranto, and all distinguished participants, online and offline. I'm Bambang Winarta. Currently, I'm a lecturer in Water Resources Engineering. It gives a great pleasure for me become moderators in this international guest lecture on managing coastal and pluvial flood risk in the cities. But first, I would like to read a brief introduction of our speaker today. So we have two speakers. First is Associate Professor Ali Daskip, and then the second one is Dr. Willem Verbeek, both from ISE Delft, Netherlands. Dr. Ali Daskip is Associate Professor of Coastal Engineering and Port Developments in ISE Delft, Netherlands. He got master from ISE Delft for Coastal Engineering and Port Developments, and then he awarded PhD in Coastal Engineering from Delft Technology University. And then the second speaker, we have Dr. Willem Verbeek. He is a senior lecturer on flood resilience. He got PhD from UNESCO ISE Delft Netherlands on the topic of urban growth-driven future of flood risk. And Dr. Verbeek is one of the founders of the Flood Resilient Chair Group at IHE Delft. He also has a wide experience in area of urban climate change. It's not only in Netherlands, but also several countries like Beijing, Dhaka, and also Mumbai. Okay, before both of our speakers will deliver presentations, let me tell you about how this guest lecture will run. First, Associate Professor Ali Dasgif will deliver his presentation around 40 minutes, and then followed by the second speaker, Dr. William, also for another 40 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, now allow me to welcome Dr. Ali Dasgif for deliver his presentations. But for participants online, if you have any question during their presentations and you don't want to open mic, you can drop your question in the chat box. So during question and answer session, I will read one by one of your questions to our speaker today. And then once again, please welcome Dr. Ali Dasgif for your presentations.
Thank you very much, Bambang. Thank you very much for a very nice introduction. And Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. If you don't mind, I would, to have a better interaction with colleagues who are sitting and the students, instead of sitting here static, I rather to get a microphone and walk, and then maybe we can have a better lecture if you don't mind. Thank you. Okay, yeah. Okay, would you mind please putting the presentation online? Okay. The topic of the work that, or the presentation that we want to present today is managing the risk of flood, of being it coastal, urban, or pluvial. But what is first very important is to understand risk. So during this course, a week that we were here also with colleagues doing this tailor-made training, the first question that I asked colleagues was actually the question that I also want to ask you guys. What is risk? Can anybody tell me what is risk? Don't be shy, that's okay. Can anybody tell me what is risk? No? Nobody? Okay, let me ask a question, a different question. Who came here today with a motorbike? Okay, when you came here with a motorbike, what kind of risk did you accept by going with a motorbike?
Maybe when I came to college, it will be an accident in motorcycle.
So you decided that there is a risk to come here with a motorbike, but you accepted it. Yeah, you accept to come here. But did you do anything to reduce this risk? What did you do?
Yes. First, I use help and yes, help and no what in the speed is not too fast, slow but sure.
I will repeat that. So he said that he has accepted the risk to come here with a motorbike, but used the helmet and really used or traveled with a proper speed, so not very fast. Yeah? So you can see that he has done two things to manage the risk. So it's written there, manage the risk. Yeah? But now when we are putting this in the concept of the whole risk, you will see that these two things that our friend here has done is a different way of risk reduction. Because in one, by reducing the speed, you have reduced the possibility of having an accident. By putting a helmet on, you have reduced the effect of accidents on you. But these are two very different things. Yeah? So let me also continue with my presentation, if I can change the slide. No? I'm not sure if I can change the slide with this. Okay, so this guy is taking risk, no? Because he may fall. But if you look at there is also a sort of a rope that he's hanging there because to reduce the possibility of fall. So this is a risk management that he does. Or in the next slide, still I cannot use mine. In the next slide, you can, that's too much. Actually, you are giving away my lecture. Yes, that's a hazard. Okay, we are there. Okay, so these guys, also divers, are diving with a shark. That actually diving with a shark supposedly has a huge risk because you may be hurt. But on the other hand, they are now in a cage. So they put themselves in the cage, not the animal, but then they are reducing their so-called exposure to the shark. So they are reducing what shark can do to them, and then the risk is low, to try to bring the risk lower. So in the next slide, I have 4 questions there. No, you're going too fast. Okay, here. So there are 4 questions, 4 sort of phrases. So you have 4 phrases on the board here. No, they really don't want me to ask the question. Okay, no. Okay, can we stop here? And I'm gonna put this also down. So I'm not touching anything. Okay, so there are 4 questions on the board. One says that getting struck by lightning, winning an Olympic medal, dying in a plane crash, or dying on your birthday. There are all 2 of them, 3 of them are very bad things. One is okay, a good thing. But now I have the question here. Just think a bit. These 4 things: getting struck by lightning, winning an Olympic medal, dying in a plane crash, dying on your birthday. Who thinks that the most probable one, so the one that has the most chance, is to get struck by lightning? No? No one thinks that. So who thinks that winning an Olympic medal has the biggest chance? Again, nobody. Okay? Dying in a plane crash, who thinks that dying in the plane crash has the biggest chance? So, me. Some people. And who think that dying on your birthday has the biggest chance? 1. Only 1. Okay. So let's see. So this shows that actually these questions shows our perception of risk. Yeah? But actually there are studies have been done for the first 3. That if we go to the first slide, next slide. So in the United States, for example, they have actually calculated it, and the chance that you get stuck by lightning is only 1 in 1530. Yeah. So if you go to the next slide now, we will see the chance of becoming an Olympic champion. The next slide. No? Okay, so becoming an Olympic champion is 1 in 662,000. So you can see that the chance of these two are very, very, very different. Yeah? So the chance of being lightning is much more and becoming a champion. And a lot of you actually mentioned that or some of you mentioning that the highest risk of dying in a plane crash has the highest chance. However, if you look at it, it is 1 in the previous slide. Okay. Now, can we go to previous slide?
Sorry, sir. There is a delay for this. So if you if you click it, please wait rather 1 second.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
so I still
Thank
can
you.
do that. Okay, thank you. So I'm waiting a bit. So dying in a plane crash is actually 1 in 11 million. Yeah. So although some of you raised your hand when I asked about if this is this has a higher probability, and you said yes, but this is practically very, very, very low. Yeah. But why do you think we will, and always when I ask these questions, when usually William asks these questions, most of the people choose this as the one who has highest probability. But why do you think we think that this dying in a plane crash has the biggest chance? Why do we think that intentionally or intuitionally we see that? We think like that. Why do you think that is like that? Lady at the corner. Yeah, but it is dying in a crash, yeah.
Yeah, because dying in a plane crash is also like so fatal, and when we think of plane crash, it means like ultimate death, and everyone's going to die.
Okay. So you think that because the consequence is very high, we also relate the chance to the consequence, yeah, because the consequence of the high. But there is also another reason for that, and that another reason is that we hear that in the news. Yeah, usually you don't hear in the news somebody died in their birthday. You don't hear that, but you hear that 375 people died in a plane crash. So we think that is more common. However, if we really think statistically, the chance that each of us die in our birthday is very high, because we have only 635 days, and so the chance of that is 1 over 365 days. I'm trying to go to the next slide. Okay, so we have 365 days, and therefore we have actually the chance is very high. Okay, now to get a more serious definition of risk, if we look at different definition of risk in different dictionaries, for example, this is a definition that you can find in the Webster dictionary. I don't want to go a lot in detail of it, but there are 2 important things that we can see quite a lot there. So I'm again waiting for, okay. So you can see that when we are talking about risk, we are talking about 2 main things. We are talking about probability of something happen to us, most probably something bad, as well as consequence of that happening. Yeah. For example, if we go to that lady at the corner that was talking about the plane crash, although the chance, the probability of plane crash is very low, but because indeed we will lose our life, the consequence is very high. So maybe the risk that we have is very, very high, if we are thinking about that. Yeah? So this is more about probability of consequences. And then sometimes you accept the risk by reducing it to the acceptable level. For example, when you take your bike to come here, you accept risk. But you know that if you manage your risk and actually have bring your probability of accident low, even if something happened to you, the consequence will not be so huge, so eventually you accept that risk. Yeah? So this is all about probability of what happens to us and the consequences. Then, if we agree with this very simple form of risk, then if we are planning for anything, for our future, for our flood management, for taking a bus, for taking a plane, or any planning that we do, if we can determine what can happen, with what likelihood, with what probability, and if we know what happened if, what is the consequence of that event for us, for example, a plane crash, a bike crash, or I don't know, winning a lottery, I don't know, because also that is a sort of a risk assessment. If we can make that, but then if we put the probability and the consequence together, then we can generate our so-called risk map. If I can show it. Okay, so this is, no, too much. We went to my next story. Okay, this one. So when we want to do our overall risk assessment, we try to make a sort of a figure, not like this, but like the other presentation that you saw. Now we are completely on. Yeah, let's take the time to think about different hazards. What is, let me ask someone. The lady sitting here, what is the hazard, what is the event that you are most afraid of?
Maybe I think it's tsunami.
So, why are you so afraid of that?
Because I think it's hard to survive on water.
Okay, so because the consequence is high, because it may kill you, or it may destroy all the livelihood. Yeah? Okay, but what is the probability of having a tsunami tomorrow? How much is the probability of having a tsunami tomorrow?
Because we don't know when tsunami is going to happen, maybe it's the same as the birthday.
So
1 to 365.
How many tsunamis did you have in the last 10 years?
Like 2 or 3 years ago, it's happened in Indonesia.
Okay, so 1 in 3 years. Yeah?
Yes.
So probability is not very high. Although the consequence is very high, probability is not very high. So if you look at a map that I have here, we are somewhere with very high in impacts, in consequence, but not maybe very high in the probability. So we are somewhere here. Yeah? So it is not something that you can completely forget and not think about it, but because of this risk, because of this risk of tsunami, you will not also stay on the roof of your home every day. Yeah? Because then you cannot go to work, and not every day tsunami comes. Yeah? So when if we can, for any risk, any other risk that you can think of, if we can think in this sort of a scheme, we will know what we should do about it. So if there is something that happens and it has a very high consequence, then we need to, we are here. So it is more probable, and it has a high, high consequence as well. Then we are somewhere there, and we need to do something about it. Yeah? An example of it, again, regarding to tsunami, is that if you are living in a place and you hear a tsunami alert. Yeah? So what is the difference now? The consequence remains the same. Tsunami has a huge consequence. You may die or everything may be destroyed. But now, because of the alert, you know that the probability is much higher. Yeah, if you trust the early warning system anyway. So suddenly, your likelihood of impact from low jumps high. So now you should do something about it. What do? You run. You run to higher levels. Yeah? So you don't think about anything. You just leave everything and run. Because suddenly, your risk is increasing, not because the consequence is changed, because tsunami is the same tsunami, but because the probability has gone high very quickly. Yeah? And then you need to rescue yourself, rescue your life. So this is sort of, in general, about definition of risk. Now, I want to guide you guys with a sort of a simple example again towards the definition that we use for climate change and flood risk. Yeah? But bear with me a bit in another simple example. No? Okay, so I am now here. A very simple example. I want now to broaden our view of risk. Imagine there are a lady and a man. They have two different cars, and they want to drive the car, yeah, in the city. We want to determine who has the higher risk. Okay? Who has the higher risk? Why? Why?
Because woman can control the emotion, and her car is that her car that yes. So okay, when we see the car, they're different. The first car is the fast car, and second car is only city's car. There's a different speed on there.
The second one was very good, actually. So forget about the first one. But the second one is very important. Yeah. So if she has a car that can go with higher speed, and she does that, then she is increasing the risk because she may have an accident. Yeah. So, and if we go back to your first point, the one who is more careful driver will have a lower risk. So when we want to have a sort of a risk analysis to see who has a higher risk, then we need to ask some question from ourselves. For example, what if she is a more careful driver? Yeah? So then she has a lower risk of having an accident. And then what happens if his car is less expensive than hers? Then he will have lower risk because the money that he needs to pay to repair the car is lower. Yeah? So he has the lower risk. Yeah? So if you look at this example, our hazard, our event is accident. Our consequence is what happened to our cars and what we need to do to cope with the accident. Then, imagine that she has a classic car. Again, the risk will go higher because finding the repair for that car is more difficult because it's a classic car. So her risk is higher. What if he has an insurance? Then the risk will come down. Yeah? Because then if you have an insurance, you will go to the insurance, they will pay for to remake your car. Yeah? To repair your car. Then, what if he needs the car to take her kids to school? Now we are moving towards a second degree of impacts, a farther impact of accident. So if he needs the car to take the kids to school, then his problem after accident is more because he cannot take the kids to school, or he needs to take a cab, or ask someone else to do it, or use grab car, I don't know. Somehow he needs to get the kids to school, so his problems are more. Therefore, the risk is higher. If she has a second car? Again, obviously, risk come down because she can put the first car in a garage and use the second car for time being. What will happen if she owns a garage, a mechanic, and so she can actually use her own facilities to fix the car and risk will come down. Yeah? But you can see that we need to ask a lot of questions and we need to look beyond the accident itself to see who has a higher risk. We do exact same things also for flooding. Yeah? But now, just to put some structure to it, in our terminology, or in the framework that I like to use, there are many different frameworks, but the framework that I like to use, I will divide the risk components into 3 components: hazard, exposure, and vulnerability. Yeah? Hazard in this case is accident. In flood management, hazard is flood. Yeah? Water comes in. Exposure is the asset, the valuable thing that we have which is in danger. In this car is the value of the car that we have. If it is flood, it is the house, it is our house that may get flooded. It is our furniture that may be destroyed. It is our TVs or cars or whatever we have in the house which may be destroyed. Then we have the third and maybe most interesting component of the risk, which we call it vulnerability. And this is the degree that we can cope with the flood. Yeah? For example, in the case of the car, an accident that we had, if you have an insurance, you reduce your risk. So you can cope better with risk. Yeah? In the first case that we discussed with you, coming here with motorbike, you talked about a hazard, which was having accident, but to reduce your risk, you first said that I will follow the allowable speed, so I will reduce my hazard, my accident, and then you said that you put a helmet on. So you reduce your exposure because your head is now not exposed directly to the ground or to the accident, but you have the safety there. Yeah? So now, to reduce our risk, we can approach one or more than of these components, yeah, to reduce our risk. For example, if we are managing a risk for ourselves, flood risk for ourselves, we can get our house insured. Or if the flood is always coming to our house, we can bring our house a bit higher, build 2 steps, come higher, that water cannot easily come to our house. But eventually, the risk is combination of all these things with the probability of hazard is our risk. And if we want to put the questions that I asked about the car, if I want to distribute it between different components, this is the distribution. The accident is hazard, exposure is the car that they have, and vulnerability is how they can cope with the accident later. So we talked about this, it's not important. Now, based on what I talked, now we want to put it in a more scientific, sort of structural definition. Again, when we are talking about the general risk, for example, for climate change or for flooding, we talk about exposure and vulnerability. And these are the definitions that I took from the IPCC 2014 report, which, what is exposure? It is everything that is exposed to the hazard, like people, livelihood, a species, ecosystem, environmental functioning, infrastructure, social or cultural assets. All of these are what can be harmed by a flood. What is vulnerability is the how we can cope with that. So how sensitive we are, how susceptible we are to the flood. And then, for example, usually when we're talking about the flood risks, richer neighborhoods, they are less risky because they have more means to cope with the flood even if they are flooded comparing to the poor neighborhoods. Depends on the wealth, depends on the social status. Because, for example, in some cultures, especially South Asian cultures or Southeast Asian cultures, there are a sense of community to help each other in difficult times. Yeah? So when the flood comes, a neighborhood can come together and try to solve it. This will reduce the risk if you're comparing to where if you are living in a very individualist country that you are by your own. So the culture also will change the vulnerability and eventually change the risk. Hazard is clear, there's the potential of a bad thing happening, an impact happening to us, and risk is putting all together again. Probability of event or trends multiplied by the impact consequences. Now, why do we need to do risk assessment? Yeah? The main reason that we had to do risk assessment is to be able to find where do we have risk and try to do something there, try to reduce the risk there. But why can't we go and make the risk everywhere zero? Why do you think we cannot go and make everything flood everywhere around the world or in a city or in a country with the zero risk to flood? Huh? Would you do it if you could make the risk everywhere completely zero? Would you do it? Why not? You're shaking your head. Why not? You're not shaking your head? I haven't. No. Okay. You know, the main problem is that if you want to make everywhere risk-free, you need to have a lot of budget for that, a lot of money. That doesn't exist. Yeah? So there is always a fight between resource management and risk management. Yeah? We go to our mayor or governor, we say that, okay, we have a problem here. The first question that they ask is, okay, how much? Yeah? So we don't have that money. So there is always a negotiation between resource management and risk management. And then we need to go towards a sort of a risk-informed decision-making to do a risk assessment and then decide which part is more important, which part is more riskier, and then invest there and then try to reduce risk to be able to manage the risk together with our resources. Yep, so this is it. Now let's go to more of a flood. I was supposed to talk about flood, no? Not cars and bicycles. So imagine that you have a house beside the river and flood is coming up. One of the ways that we do that, it's a hazardous flooding. We look at the probability of the flood. We said, okay, it's 12% to have a flood. And then we say that if that flood comes, I will have 2 meters of water in my house. Yeah? And if 2 meters of water comes to my house, I need to use 10% of the value of my house to repair it. Yeah? So again, the hazard is flood, 2 meters of flood. The consequence in this case is 10,000 euro in this case, for example, and the probability is 12%. So if we want to do it quickly in a traditional way, we multiply 12%, 10,000 euro and 10,000 euro, and we say, okay, your risk is about 1,200 euro. That's a risk. Yeah? But this is not the full thing, because we are looking at only one flood, 2 meter water. We are looking at one probability, and we look only at the cost. Yeah? So we don't. Now let's see if we can make it more complicated. So we can also look. Yeah, Padoni laughs at me because I make life complicated step by step. Wait for it. So, hazard is flooding, but now we can look at the probabilistic model of a flood. So we can produce these type of graphs. We say, okay, different depth of flood may have different probabilities. So if, for example, in this case, the probability of having 2 meter flood depth or less is about 40%. The probability of having 3 meter or less is almost 1, and it is almost no flood will be more than 3 meter. Yeah? We can use our models to produce this. So now we are putting more in our risk management. And also, we can produce something which is called depth damage curve. depth damage curve tells us with what depth at my house, how much percent of my value of my house will be lost. For example, for 2 meter, 10%, but it quickly goes high. And suddenly, if it reaches 5 meter, then my whole house is gone and I have lost all of it. So I can make also this. And then to make the full curve, I can combine these two. And then I have such a curve that tells me how much value of my house will be lost with what probability. Yeah? So for example, here it tells me that with 20% of the value of my house will be lost with a probability of 70%. So up to 20% of value will be lost with a probability of 70%. Now by this, I can decide if I want to make the insurance, I want to buy insurance or not, or maybe I want to do something with my house to make it better. For example, simply if I put my expensive furniture in the first floor or second floor, then I am better off because nothing will be lost at the first floor if it gets flooded. So very simple things can change my risk. But this can help me to decide what I want to do with my risk. But this is not the complete picture of the risk. Yeah? Why it's not a complete picture of the risk? Just think about the secondary effects, the indirect effects. Yeah? For example, again, to make life a bit more complicated, the fact that who will pay for repairing my house change my risk. If there is no one to pay, there is no insurance, then I have higher risk. If I have saving to do that, I have lower risk. Yeah? So even two neighbors with the exact same house, because one has saving and one doesn't, may have different risks, or having insurance or not. How long does it take to repair? Can I repair it in 6 hours, or no, I need to be out for a month or a year? Do I have anywhere else to sleep? Because for example, if the night that flood comes, I cannot sleep in the house, do I have a grandparents somewhere to go and stay with? Can I pay for a hotel to go and stay with? If yes, then my risk is lower. If not, again, the risk is higher. How much extra cost does I have during the repair? Do I have during the repair? Because if I need to pay for a hotel to stay, then I have higher cost again. So that adds to my consequences, adds to my risk. Again, more difficult aspects of risk. What is the emotional impact of seeing a house in water? Yeah? There are some things that if you lose, you cannot get it back with any insurance. For example, if I have the pictures of my past grandfather in an album and the flood comes and destroys it. Yeah? The price of the album is like what? €5 or whatever. Yeah? But the emotional effect of it, you cannot put a price on it. So these are more indirect and intangible effect of the flood that makes flood risk assessment even more difficult. Sometimes when somewhere is flooded, I even don't want to go back to that area because I'm scared. So I need to find a job somewhere else, move somewhere else. Again, increases the risk. So if we want to have a more complicated risk assessment, then we need to think about tangible and intangible effects. And I have put some examples of tangible and intangible effects also here. Tangible direct effects is what we see is lost and we need to rebuy. But also, for example, if I have a child and my house is flooded, she may not be able to go to school. So then education is interrupted. And again, this is an intangible effect, but it has an effect on her life and my life. I don't want to go to a lot of detail of it, but you heard some examples of it from me. Yeah? And if, of course, you can read a lot of literature about these effects. Okay. But till now, our life has been not very complicated yet. Well, it can get complicated when we think about future. When as a risk manager in a city, we want to think about our risk in 100 years from now, this risk of the city in 50 years from now. Why it gets more complicated? Because future is uncertain. We don't know what future will bring. We talked about hazard of exposure and vulnerability. Future can change any of them. Yeah? So again, our simple example, if the house that I have is flooded and I'm looking at the future, will the flood increase in the future because of climate change? Will I go and buy more expensive furniture? Then it will increase my risk in the future, but I don't know it now. Will I go and buy an insurance to bring my risk down? Even there are some external things. Will government ask me to move from that house? Then the risk will be practically zero because I'm not in that house anymore. So future is very uncertain. How can we deal with the future? To deal with these uncertainties is by making scenarios of future, like scenarios of movies. Yeah? We don't know what will happen in the future. We don't have a crystal globe to look at it and see what future comes bring for us, but we can see if future is like this, if future is like that, if future climate change will increase the flood. And based on that, we can do our risk assessment. This is actually what we did in the last week for a case in Indonesia, and then we see what happens in the future. And then based on that scenario, we can determine our risk and manage it. But we should be informed that this is based on a scenario. We have many scenarios. And then decision making becomes difficult. For which scenario do we want to do our risk management or risk assessment? So then this will be the complete picture. We have vulnerability, we have hazard, we have exposure, so we have the risk, but climate is changing from one side and socio-economy changing from the other side. Climate is increasing our hazards usually, and then there are economical growth that may increase our hazard, or government may interfere to try to reduce our risk. So this shows all now the full picture of the risk assessment, for example, in the flood risk assessment condition. Now, just to finish this part of the course, I want to just give you an example of a case in Indonesia that we did a flood risk management. This is the city of Pekalongan in Central Java. Yeah? Does anybody is here from there? From Central Java, from Pekalongan?
Ali, sorry, you already spent 40 minutes.
I'm past the 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, but because there is a bit problem, technical problem in the earlier of your presentation, so I'll give you extra 10 minutes.
10? No, I think I will be done like in 2 minutes.
Okay.
Okay. So is anybody from Pekalongan or Central Java? No? Okay. I will show you. There's a city there. It's a very interesting city with some heritage there. And then there are 3 rivers going through that city. And then we also have the sea, of course, coming from the north. And then we look at the flood or hazard. The main reason of hazard there is extreme sea level, river discharge, and land subsidence. So land is coming down, going down, sea level is coming up, and rivers are coming. So what we did, we tried to use the data that we have to make sort of a flood map. So we can say that these places, based on one scenario, may get flooded. Yeah? And if those got flooded, then we looked at, for example, 2 scenarios in the future. Flood with extreme sea level and land subsidence. Yeah? So we have extreme sea level in one scenario, and in another scenario, land subsidence. And then we looked at the land use map of that area, of that city, and then decided how much water level each land use can take, can accept, and developed our sort of a risk map like this. But now you can see that in the present condition of land use and present flood, if we go to the future with that specific scenario, we will have huge risky areas. A lot of risky areas. A lot of places become red. Yeah? Because flood is increasing. But then there, we thought, okay, how can we reduce this risk? Yeah? Then they come up with a plan for future to implement a different land use, plan for a different land use in the future in the city. And if we use that land use in our risk assessment, we saw that yes, indeed, if they make that land use in the future, then the risk will be reduced. Yeah? So in this case, for example, this specific risk reduction measure didn't do anything with flood. So we didn't stop the flooding. We didn't reduce the hazard, but we reduced the consequences. Yeah? So this is more or less what I wanted to talk about, more about the concept of the risk and one example, how we do risk assessment. And I think William will take it from here and show how we can actually do things inside the city to make it less or more resilient to flood risk. Thank you. I'm sorry that I increased the time.
Okay, thank you very much, Ali, for your nice and attractive presentations. Now we are going for the second speaker, Dr. William, but I think we have to break for 2 or 3 minutes because of Azan. Yeah, we have to break for 2 or 3 minutes because of Azan. Okay, once again, thank you very much, Ali, for your nice presentation. But don't worry, the game haven't finished yet. After William's presentation, we will have 25 minutes for question and answer sessions.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah. Now I will invite for the second speaker, Dr. William, for please, Dr. William, deliver your presentations.
Thank you. Well, I already had a great introduction, and thank you very much for having me. Quickly getting to know you a little bit. As I understand, we have three types of students here, for three different faculties. We have planners. So can you raise your hand? Who's a planner here? Who's from the faculty of planning? Nobody? They're there. They're a bit shy. Okay, five. There are some water resource people. Who are you? Okay. And then the rest are civil engineers, right? Okay, that's good. Well, I try to make a presentation for each of you, having in there a lot of images. I'm going to show a lot of projects, so not too much text, not too many boring graphs. But I will start with a part that the water people will think is very familiar, and then I will end with projects that are more maybe for the planners and that they will be more familiar with. So let's see. All right. So when I was growing up in the early 1970s, we were thinking about the future. The year 2000 was like a magical moment in the future, and we thought that the future was going to be things like this. Cities would look somewhere like this, these science fiction cities. And I thought, well, when we reach the year 2000, this is going to be really exciting. So I was really excited. And it turned out maybe a bit like this. Here we are in Singapore, and some of our cities in the world look almost like science fiction. They look spectacular, green, very futuristic structures are in there. But unfortunately, many of the cities also look like this. Here we are in India, in Mumbai, for instance, where I run some projects, and you see many problems, many water-related problems, solid waste problems, poverty, all concentrated on very small areas. So if we think about the future, yeah, we have often, and Ali talked a lot about risk, we have two risk drivers that often have the limelight. On the one hand, we have climate change. We talk a lot about climate change in the news, in the newspaper, with the IPCC reports, and we do a lot of research, and we often talk about climate change. Another risk driver is the urban development. Ali gave you the risk component, so he talked about hazard, exposure, vulnerability. So by our cities growing all the time in places where they shouldn't actually grow, in the floodplains, close to coastal areas where there's maybe a tsunami threat, we concentrate more and more people and assets in dangerous places, right? And that's not always the best solution, and that will definitely increase our risk in the future. There are also other risks we engineers might be more aware of, and maybe planners not so much. Our infrastructure is getting older, starts failing, water pipes are breaking, our drainage channels are breaking or clogging up. So a lot of our infrastructure need maintenance, need upgrading, etc. And in many European cities, for instance, the urban drainage system is extremely old. It's already more than 150 years old, and it's at the turning point of breaking down, and needs large investments to be upgraded and to also cope not only with the future climate change, but also already with the rainfall that we have today. Oh, it's a bit too fast. So to summarize a little bit, I can talk about this for a long time, but cities have to cope with climate change, aging water infrastructure, rapidly changing urban areas, but also you, and Ali talked a bit about this again, but you demand also different things from your city. Slowly you want more urban green maybe, a more livable city, less traffic. So the way you look at your city, the things you accept from your cities are also changing. And we see, of course, an increasing impact of urban areas on our ecosystems. If you're a water guy, if you're from water resource management, and we put on our water glasses, we like to look at cities from that perspective. You can see a sort of evolution in cities. So if we are on the most elementary level, and we only want to provide water supply access, we could say we live in a water supply city. This is the most rudimentary form. After oxygen, water is the first thing we as humans need, right? Without it, we can't live. After providing water supply, the second necessity is public health protection, sewage, right? And we can move on, then we can start talking about flood protection. We move to the drain city. We want to require environmental pollution standards, etc. We walk in the waterway city, the water cycle cities, when we start to talk more about sustainability. And ultimately, you could say we want to move towards the water-sensitive city, maybe the last step in the evolution of cities towards a more sustainable integrated water environment. Now, what is that? I will tell you a little bit about that. If you're a water resource student, this should be bread and butter. You know this by heart. So what are we talking about when we talk about maybe a water cycle? On the one hand, we have precipitation, rainfall, right? Well, a lot of that rainfall evapotranspires. It evaporates through the sun and through the vegetation. Some of that will go into the ground as infiltration, and a bit will be runoff. You know, runoff is the water you can see on the ground, right? So that typically looks a bit like this in a section. Then we started to build our cities. So what did we do? We pave a lot of ground, right? So on the one hand, we have the same amount of precipitation, but because that water can't infiltrate anymore, we have large volumes of urban runoff. We don't have a lot of trees anymore. That water cannot evapotranspirate, so that's why the volume of runoff is increasing. Also because we live there, we have huge volumes of wastewater, and we have to import so-called virtual water, potable water and virtual water. Virtual water is water that's embedded in products. So you can, if you want to go there, you can talk about the water footprint. Maybe you heard about that. So that's really the amount of water needed to produce particular products. Okay. So to compensate for that, we implemented a lot of so-called gray infrastructure, the typical engineer stuff. So all the pipes in the ground to provide the urban drainage, water supply, etc., etc. And you see there often the difference between architects, planners maybe, and the engineers. Architects and planners, they care about what's above the ground, and all that other stuff the engineers have to solve, right? You guys do your thing underground, right? And solve our water problems. Now, when we talk about a water-sensitive city, we want to integrate the two much more. So instead of just accepting the amount of runoff that we have, that is polluted maybe, and we get rid of it, no, we start to reuse some of our stormwater. We try to increase the amount of urban green that we have, so we have more evapotranspiration again, and we treat some of our stormwater and increase the amount of infiltration. So what we do is we try to close that water cycle a little bit in our urban areas and bring some of that natural water cycle back to our cities. So you see that nicely over here, or what we try to do. So what we typically did was, and this is for instance from my country, I'm from the Netherlands, when we look at the environmental degradation that our cities produced in the 1800s, just before the big industrial revolution took place, we were doing pretty fine. But then we started to build a lot, have a lot of heavy industry in the cities, and we really started to above, let's say, a safe limit to the environment, and now we have to repair a lot of our mistakes that we made in the past, right? And you see that very literally if you go here to Seoul. Seoul, capital of Korea, right? South Korea. And you see what happened there. In the past, they had an urban river. That river was used mostly as a drainage canal, and as so often in the industrial age, that became very dirty. People dumped a lot of wastewater in there, solid waste, and they just covered it. It made it one big culvert. And then car ownership was on the rise in the 1960s, so they thought, okay, we can cover it with a big highway, we hide the rivers, and we have good road access in our city. And then some engineers said, hey, that was not a good idea. We're going to bring this back. We're going to do river restoration. We're going to really, literally, you see them really overcoming the mistakes from the past. So actually, the company that built the highway, the CEO of this company, he became the mayor of Seoul, and he uncovered that road again. And that's the Jongchekong River. And you see, for instance, how that looks now. Maybe you've seen images of this in Seoul. So there's a big river restoration project. The highway is taken away. They invested in more public transport. And this is now really an area that adds to the culture of Seoul, but very much also to the climate, providing a wind corridor. So there's a better urban climate in the city. And this is now one of the best spots in Seoul, and really celebrated all over the world as a great example of green urban regeneration. Okay, so that's an example of a water-sensitive city project where we integrate urban blue and green above ground and really create an interaction between, on the one hand, sustainable urban development, and the urban water cycle, and the urban design and build form. So it's an integration between what you water resource people do, your engineers do, and you planners do together. So not anymore as separate sectors. So this approach you see now all over the world a bit. For instance, you might have heard about the Chinese Sponge City program. The Chinese are laying out a massive program to treat cities literally like a sponge. So really to do more with their stormwater, reuse it, infiltrate it, and not anymore just drain it out in dirty old drainage channels. In other countries in the world, they call it differently. So the water-sensitive cities is typically an Australian term, initially driven very much by drought management. Because Australia, in the past, always had big drought problems. Now you see also flood problems appearing. China Sponge Cities, LID, low impact development in the US, blue green infrastructure in Europe, sustainable urban drainage in the UK, etc., etc., etc. It's basically all the same. A little bit different approach, but it's the same name, a different name for the same concept. Okay, we past this, sorry. An example of that you see in the city of Copenhagen. This is a huge flood in 2011 that they had. They called it a cloudburst event. So they had 150 millimeters in 2 hours. And for Copenhagen, that's a huge amount of rain. So that's a 2,000 year. He was talking about likelihoods and probabilities. So that's a 2,000 year event that happened. Well, you see here the consequences. Massive flooding in the streets, in the subways, etc., etc. More than €1 billion in insurance claim. Critical infrastructure, emergency services were not working anymore, etc., etc. So big disaster. So as a response, they started to develop water-sensitive city projects that on the one hand improve the climate resilience, the resistance that city has to climate impacts, but on the other hand also increases the livability and the quality, urban quality of the city. So they are now working on more than 300 different projects in the coming 20 years. Well, let's not go too much in detail, but you see here the threats that they are facing, and they really are facing a shift. So on the left you see a 100-year pluvial flood, so rainfall flooding in 2010, but they also have to more and more deal with coastal flooding. This is a 20-year coastal flood event estimated for 100 years later in 2110. So you see that Copenhagen has to deal with multiple hazards. Well, what kind of projects are they developing for that? For the pluvial flooding, typical you see projects like this. So they make multifunctional urban areas combining recreation with flood retention. Flood retention is an expensive word for just you store your rainwater in some place and maybe you drain it out later. So here you see they like a lot of hockey and ice hockey over there. So normally this is just a park, a recreation space in the city, and when there's a stormwater event, that place is filled with water temporarily. No, very simple. Okay. They also start to do that with streets. So here you see a very wide street section with on the one hand 2 road lanes, in the center more recreation area, pieces of grass, and you see on the bottom of that grass you see a so-called bioswale, bioinfiltration system, where the water is cleaned through the vegetation, captured in those pipes, and that water can be reused again for irrigation of that same space. Here it's raining, and here you see how that area functions when there's a heavy rainfall event. So the street starts to have a function as flood retention. It's not anymore just something for the engineers they have to fix underground, right? No, it's integrated into the urban plan and the urban design of the city. Here an urban street where where this is during normal events, so they changed 2-lane road into a 1-lane with a bicycle path, and on the side you see those green spaces. There stormwater is captured, treated, and drained out and reused again in other places. And this is how it looks during a normal day when it's dry. But when it's raining hard and the street is flooded, you see the sidewalks are elevated on the side, so people can still walk there. But in the center, this area really is used as a flood conveyance channel and drained out. So this is a little bit how that works. There's a lot of information about these kinds of things. If you Google bioswale on the internet, you see how these different layers are used to clean stormwater also. So you can really reuse it, for instance, for your garden, for other secondary water uses, maybe for your laundry machine, for your toilets, of course, etc., etc. Okay, that's all very nice quality. You saw a bit of flood. So let's structure this a little bit. So Ali was talking a lot about the risk. And if we talk about the hazards, he also introduced that, we can think of 4 classes of events. You see that on the top. So you see everyday events, like today. Nothing special. It's not especially bad weather. There's no rain. So typically, as an engineer, you don't design stuff for this. Then we have so-called design events. These are your standards. So maybe as an engineer here you say, okay, I have a design standard of a rainfall event once in every 5 years. So I have to create a drainage system that can capture all that water from a 5-year, that statistically happens once in every 5 years, and drain that out. if the event is bigger, okay, we're gonna have flood, but at least I reached my 5-year event. Then we have so-called exceedance events. So that's above that event, rain that happens maybe every 10 years or 15 or 100 years. So there's quite some flood, but it's not life-threatening. And finally, we have our extreme events. Those events, those freak events that once in a while happen. There's loads of rain. There's really 2 meters of floods. And well, the city we've been working on in the past week experienced some of these events earlier. So you can say you have these 4 classes of events. Now you could say that professionally we are dealing with those different classes. I've never heard an architect who is thinking about design events. What is a design event, for instance? If you're an architect, there will be the fire escape. I have never seen an architect who put a lot of effort in designing a very beautiful fire escape, right? No, you are there to create urban quality. Everyday quality for day-to-day events. You are there to create value in the city, livable cities. As an engineer, you are not typically, you're also not designing a great fire escape. You are the ones that do the fire escapes. You have to make sure that your buildings or all your other urban assets, they comply with the standards that are there, the safety standards. But you are not so much thinking of exceedance. What if they are beyond? Then we are talking about insurance, public works. People have to clean up afterwards, right? And finally, if there are extreme events, that's something for the emergency service people. They have to handle that. Maybe the army even, who has to come into effect to help out, evacuate people, things like that. So if we want to make our cities more climate resilient, we want to design in a way for as much as possible for all these 4 stages. Not only architects don't think of your day-to-day only, creating value. Engineers not only think of your design events, but collaborate. And then also the emergency services and all those other stakeholders, professionals that could be integrated. I'll try to show you a few examples of this. This is in my home city, in the city of Rotterdam. This is here in the center. So you think, nice canal. On the right side you see there a sculpture garden. And you think, okay, nothing special about it. But this area has been exactly designed for exceedance. So if there's a big heavy rainfall event, all that water floods into that area and it will look something like this. But this is not considered a flood. This is how it's designed. So this captured. So this drains out slowly in the secondary water courses. And well, you need to brush it a bit, clean it a bit, but it's okay. So floods are integrated into the urban design of this area. Another example why they do this. This is in the city of Hamburg in Germany, where there's a whole neighborhood completely adapted to cope with floods. So if they see the river levels going up, they know that in advance. There's an early warning system. They have flood shutters that you see, for instance, on the right side here. So all these houses can be closed. They have evacuation routes above ground, bridges. So they designed this whole area that looks great during normal events, but also it still works during floods. Here we see, this is almost next to my house. I live around the corner here, and this is a so-called Rotterdam Water Square. And this is a stormwater capture system where we capture all the rainwater from the roofs of these houses, from the streets, into these areas. It's nothing spectacular, it's very simple design. And we let it slowly drain into the stormwater drainage system. Because you water resource engineers who did urban drainage courses know it's not the volume of water that's the problem, it's the intensity of the peak, right? So if we have a very strong rainfall event, very short but very intense, our drainage channels cannot take it. But if it goes slowly, so if we can delay that water flowing in, then there's not a problem. So that's what we actually do here. And the good thing is we combine it again with everyday events. So what do? We create public value. So here there's a community garden that you see here. This is actually an area of with a high concentration of immigrants in my city in Rotterdam, and a lot of especially the Moroccan women who live here. They are hard to reach. They don't go out the door very often. So what brings people together in the world? Food. So they grow together with the whole community of women over here. The children are there. They grow here food in this area. On the same time, they take ownership of the area, so they clean it. It's maintained. So it works very well. It's a nice project, very simple. And when there's a lot of rain, it looks like this. He's a little boy who put a lot of ducks in the water, apparently. And here you see it again also. Bigger example. This is the project called the Big U for New York City. Maybe you, a while ago, you remember there was Hurricane Sandy in New York that caused a lot of damages in Manhattan, but also in other areas in New York, Staten Island, for instance. In a Rebuild by Design competition, they developed the Big U, led by a Danish design firm. Basically, they created also a buffer around New York City to cope better with, in this case, river floods. And you see here again, this is a poorer area with these brownstone complexes that you see, these old social housing projects. And this was normally a highway, a bad area, disconnected from the water. And what they did is first build here a sort of recreation park on the side, and now they are covering that whole highway and make it a dike that protects that area from floods in the future, but also combines it with a recreation area. So you have a multifunctional project, again, increasing the resiliency of the city, but also increasing the livability of the city. And that's again combining, in this case, the two professions, the two values again. This is also around the corner of my house. This is a multifunctional dike, the Dutch version of this. So here also we combine three different functions. Protection from river floods on the one hand, so this is part of the one of the big Dutch rings of dikes. Retail, so there's 1 kilometer of shops downstairs, and also a park for the inhabitants of the neighborhood, here on the side. So again, this also helps in the financing. So the shops, they pay for the park. The national government, who is responsible for the dike, pays for that park, and they create a really nice public area that would normally there would not be money for this. So this is again also from a financial perspective interesting to combine things, because one function can pay for another maybe, where there would normally not be money for. Here you see an example of another water square. What these type of projects can also do very well is to mobilize citizens, to create a participatory process. So for instance, this is in the schoolyard, also a hugely paved area, so there's a flood problem, and there they made a water square, so they capture stormwater again with the students together. So they asked the students, what do you like there? They made proposals, workshops with the students. So they created an area that the students really wanted. So with a basketball court, a sort of stage where they can sit during breaks and have fun and talk and do whatever. This is how it looks when it has rained. So it captured again that storm water that will slowly drain in. And this is some of the, well, this is a sort of comic from all the workshops that the design office had with those students. More of these water squares. So the water square in the city of Rotterdam is really a concept that they are employing everywhere. It's scalable. It's small-scale interventions that they can do that again improve public space, but also have a function in making the city more flood resilient. And the good thing is this is a gradual process, so you don't have to do it all at once. So whenever there's an opportunity for an area to be redeveloped, then they start designing this. So slowly, the the risk level of the city will go down over time. Here's another one. Here you see, for instance, on the top right, you see here, these are these plastic crates in which water is stored underground. So there is temporary storage facilities, and on top there will be the square for the children to play and for the elderly to sit, for instance. Similar project on an area that's normally never used, nobody goes there, but this is under a big flyover of a highway. So Rotterdam is really searching for every spot they can, if there is space available, to store water and to develop urban quality. So also here again a nature project where people are now going to walk the dog, for instance, but also it's used for flood retention. We don't do that only in rich countries like the Netherlands, but we try to do that also elsewhere. Here I am, for instance, in Bangladesh, in Dhaka, in the capital, and here you see a so-called lift house. That's a house that can literally float when it gets flooded. So it's built, the bottom is built out of crates of PET bottles, so the plastic bottles. These things, a bit bigger ones, they float in the water. And the bamboo structure is on top. It's a housing for the poor, so when there's a flood, that part will literally start floating. So here you see the construction of that. Here you see similar things we are trying to do in a peri-urban area outside of Dhaka, in a city called Sirajganj, where we, on the one hand, we make a so-called amphibious sanitation unit, where we have, on the one hand, floating construction, and also a bio-infiltrated toilet where the water is cleaned. And we saw here interesting cultural options. The people, I didn't design this. This was done together with another office. So this toilet is. This was culturally they did not really. This is where design and engineering sometimes doesn't always work. So from a water perspective, this works perfectly. The water is cleaned, the thing floats very well, so when there's a flood, no problem. But the toilet is extremely exposed, so nobody wants to go there. Because you are sitting there and you have the feeling that the whole world is watching you. So that was really a design problem. They didn't think that very well through. Anyway. So here you see us making also floating floors. So we retrofitted one of the very cheap housing for urban poor. Where they normally have a floor on clay, and we made a new floor with PET bottles and wood on top, and that floor can also, when there's a flood, it can float up inside the house. So you see us, collecting PET bottles here, and then here's the construction of that floor in the actual house, and that can move up, and it's stable. So that's quite a nice project. I'm very proud of this one. And we had a lot of publicity, so that works. When you do this stuff also, and there's a huge attention at the moment for this. So don't think it only costs money. Everybody's looking for flood resilient solutions in cities, and if you can combine that also with poverty reduction, so I'm still waiting for Bill and Melinda Gates to call me to sponsor a big project. But yeah, they're divorced now, so that's maybe a problem. So. I'm almost there at the end, no worries. We try to do that with buildings, but also with parks, etc. So here you see, for instance, that we do not think of urban green spaces anymore only as aesthetic things that make the city more beautiful, but we see them as functional elements where we can really add climate functions, but also other functions to the city. So that can go for community open spaces, ecological landscapes, blue and green infrastructure, working and productive landscape, urban agriculture, right? And transitional landscapes. That can turn into these big projects. For instance, here you see a big urban wetland, really to improve the water quality. This is a project in the UK, where water is led through that wetland and is cleaned. Vegetation has a tendency to remove a lot of the pollutants out of bad quality water. And here we are, for instance, in a project that is more flood resilient. Here we are. This is a floating school in Makoko in Lagos, Nigeria, one of the most challenging cities in the world, with a lot of informal settlements, and where there's literally no space anymore to build. So then you only can resolve to floating structures that have the good quality that they can't flood, so they literally move with the flow. So you see that here in that largely amphibious or even floating community over there. Oh, almost there. These projects in China, for instance, they are running lots of these type of projects. There are hundreds of projects in these so-called sponge cities. But what they don't do well there is that they China is a land of standards and of goals, of quantities. We have to put 1,000 projects. Okay, we'll build 1,000 projects. But we don't really always think where, for instance. So there they have these great urban spaces, wetlands to clean water, to provide flood protection, but often in the middle of nowhere. As a planner, you would say, why here? There's nobody here. So you go to these parks and you're completely alone. You think, why did they put it here? In a place where there's a lot of people, there's nothing. So yeah, again, an example how urban planners and engineers should really work better together to create safer cities, but also cities that create more value for its people. Well, bioswales, I already covered that a little bit. Green roofs. Here we try to mainstream this. The central station of Rotterdam, actually, the train station. In front of it is a huge parking garage with 8 floors, I think, on the ground. And normally the people who designed those parking garages would, okay, we made the project, finish it, build it. But now here also again, the water people started to interfere and say, hey, we also have a program, we need to solve a flood program. So on the roof of the parking garage, they made another water storage there with these plastic crates that you see here. So this provides actually temporal water storage that will be drained out later. So again, a combination. And we have also our High Line, like every respectable city these days. So there's an old train station that has been turned into blue-green infrastructure and that is now used as a landscape park in the city of Rotterdam. That has also a function to provide less urban heat, because also drought and urban heat starts to be an increasing problem, also in my city in the Netherlands. Green roofs. We have a massive green roof program. Green roofs are nice. They have limited functionality when it comes to flood reduction. That's often a bit overstated in the media. In the newspapers you say, oh, it's the next big thing after sliced bread, but that's really not the case. They can capture some stormwater, but if you have this peak rainfall event, they do not that much. But for the urban climate, air quality, but also recreation, they are great, of course. Here you see dike houses, integration of houses into an actual dike body in the Netherlands. Here you see again amphibious houses. These are houses that during no flood events, they rest on bedrock, but when there's a flood, they can actually move. And here you see a few projects just for fun, to make people more aware of the issue of climate change, of water. So this is, for instance, a so-called watershed, a small pavilion just made out of these PVC pipes in which we put vegetation structures that will slowly drip through when it's raining. But it's a great way to make citizens more aware of the issues of rainfall events and of climate in general. Here you see stormwater capturing, very small, simple projects. Rainwater harvesting, So again, also here, that water is captured so people can use it for irrigation. And if you do this at a massive scale, it starts to add up. If you have 5 houses where you do it, it means nothing. It's literally a drop in the ocean. And this is happening. This is in Antwerp. Urban gardening and urban agriculture. This is in Detroit, a city that has been largely abandoned for a while because of the decline of the American car industry. So a lot of people moved away, and all of a sudden space was available, space was cheap. So you start to see really an integration there also of urban green into the city, and ultimately this also has some climate function, although here it's not really designed and limited. Okay, I'm closing. We developed a set of 10 commandments, if you will, for water-sensitive cities. If you want to be a water-sensitive city, we think you have to do this. So we often go to cities and we say, can you score this? Can you test this? Can you do a self-assessment? So I don't know. We're in Malang here. We have the structures in place to involve citizens in the planning, design and implementation of blue-green infrastructure projects. Do you have that? If I'm a citizen, I can call and I say, I will be involved in the formulation of projects. Do you involve citizens? Or it's difficult? I don't know. Okay, maybe I won't go through all these 10. But so it is about citizen participation on the one hand. So how are you as communities able to be involved, but also to start projects by yourself if you want. So I see some community-based projects also here. I heard about those. It's about design integration on the small scale, but also on the city-wide scale. So do you have a vision that involves climate change and climate adaptation, but also livability, ecology, and sustainability for 2050, for instance? It's about financing and evaluation. How do you finance this? How do you integrate all that climate adaptation into your actual development plans that you have and redevelopment plans? It's about mainstreaming. That's the same thing, actually. Financing evaluation is we are better and better able to put a price tag on the benefits that these blue and green infrastructures give. That's avoided damages for all those climate hazards, but that's also health impacts, positive health impact, value of property that goes up, etc., etc. We can put a price tag on that now, so make a business model, so our project developers are starting to be convinced about this. And finally, operation, maintenance, and monitoring. We do that a bit too little. We build something and think, then it's done, bye-bye. But we should be able to check, is it functioning, upgrade it, maintain it well, and that will work better. So if you, well, comply with these 10 essentials, you could say, I'm a water sensitive city, and hopefully in Malang we can do that too. Is that all new? Nah, not really. Have you seen these kind of things? We go to India, you will see a lot of these. These are so-called step wells. These are water capturing, stormwater retention areas built by rulers, by kings, by people with power for the city. Most of the time, these are huge structures, and they are all to provide water services in times of drought. So the integration of water into the city is nothing new. We do this already very long. And finally, if you don't manage to do all this, at least you can adapt gracefully and go down fashionably at least, and be resilient in this way. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, William. Actually, you still have 2 minutes for 40 minutes. Yeah, but it's okay. Yeah, thank you very much. Ali and also William already delivers their presentation. Now we are going to question and answer sessions. So I will invite participant in here, an offline participant and also online participant, to give question to our speaker today, Ali and also Williams. Because in here there is 3 departments, regional and urban plannings, and then civil engineering and also water resources engineering. Perhaps for the first session, I will give chance 1 question from civil engineering, and then 1 question from regional and urban planning, and 1 question from water resources engineering departments. Okay, you can raise your hands. Yeah, from civil engineering.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Faria Sinta. I'm from civil engineering. So I saw in that presentation that in the future for the goals, they're planning to make 70% absorption in the urban land. How could that possible if we know that population growth in the future will be extremely high? And I want to know how you guys, the professors, the doctors, the engineering, planning to make the absorption space while we, as humans, need foundation for our houses, apartments, school that made of steel and concrete. As we know, it's bad for absorption and environment. Is there any alternative material to replace that? Thank you.
Guess I should answer that, right?
Yeah, you can answer the question.
Okay, yeah, so, first of all, the quest for space is really something that we have all in common. So it is, first of all, it's very, if you already have a very dense city, so as I see, for instance, here in Malang, it is not easy to turn that back into that nice green area that I'm showing you. Can we still do something in these kinds of cities? Well, yes, there are, in terms of materials, there's evolution. So there is so-called permeable pavement, for instance, where water can go through and infiltrate. So that works pretty well. I've seen a lot of applications of this already. The downside is you need to maintain it. You have to literally vacuum clean it once in a while, so the water, the infiltration and ultimately percolation will be maintained. So that's, you could slowly retrofit your parking or your streets for that. Then the second part where I would start is parking spaces. Also those you can quite easily create more structures where water can infiltrate and you have green areas there. Well, what's next? Probably I have not been able to look inside of the houses and on the backside, but I'm sure there are a lot of unused spaces or half open spaces, and that's really an awareness program that you slowly have people start greening their garden and take pride in it. I see that happening a bit in Vietnam, for instance, where they have similar types of cities, not so tall, not with a lot of skyscrapers, but very wide and completely covered. So, but I completely agree with you that this is not an easy thing. I mean, this won't happen overnight, and it's a slow revolution. And as I try to show a bit in the city where I'm from, Rotterdam, also with these water squares, it is a gradual development. So we go one by one, step by step, we start to adapt. But that's not something you do in the next 5 years only. That's a slower process. So yeah, I can't make it more easy than that. It's not simple, but I think we are hopefully moving in that direction. Thank you.
Maybe I can add also something there. Those things will be successful if it is really a start from the grassroots level. I mean that from communities. So I think one of the duties of you guys after graduation is in your community services to increase the awareness of the importance of these changes for the flood protection in the future among people. So you need to talk to them, you need to disseminate the knowledge that you gain to people, and then automatically these things happens because they understand it and they want to do it. Yeah? But if we go somewhere and say, okay, you should do this, no one will do that for us.
And one funny example I'm just thinking of, in many of the Dutch cities, we have, for instance, one of the things we want is to depave our cities, right? So we have a lot of concrete tiles and we want to take them off. So what we did is we started a competition between cities. So there's a free the tile competition. So if you as a citizen, there's some regulations for it, the municipality, but it's fairly easy. So I remove 5 tiles in front of my house and I put some plants there. I can bring that to the website and Rotterdam gets a score of 5. So there's a sort of national pride and a competition between cities, how much we managed as citizens to depave them. And well, simple things like this, like a competition that helps people, that helps this transition process in a way.
Okay, is there any follow-up questions? No? Okay. Okay, we'll continue for the next questions because first question is already from civil engineering, perhaps the second one from regional urban plannings or water resources engineering. Okay.
Before this, I want to say thank you for Professor Ali Dasgip and Dr. William for this amazing presentation. So my question is, what can you say towards these multifunctional structures to the cost efficiency for maintenance in this developing country? Recalling, we have problems towards budget during planning structures with governments. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's very interesting question. And I think there are two sides into this question. One is that if you remember the last slide of William, it was something called mainstreaming. Yeah? No one will pay budgets for a standalone climate adaptation project. No one in the world they will do that. So this should be planned in a way that when, for example, a maintenance plan is there, or the lifetime structure is finished, when they want to rebuild it or maintain it, build in these things, multifunctionality in it. Yeah? And I think eventually multifunctionality, if it is done efficiently, can reduce the required budget. Yeah, for example, again, one picture that I really like from William's presentation is the houses inside the dikes. If you want to build a dike separately and a house separately, they usually may cost more than if you can integrate them. It doesn't really completely divide the cost to two, but it reduces the overall cost. Yeah? But don't think that anywhere you can really do a climate change adaptation or even flood risk reduction project as a single standalone project.
Yeah, first the financing indeed. To add to that, especially these blue-green infrastructure projects that we were talking about, what is better and better acknowledged is that they have a lot of so-called co-benefits. If you have a greener environment, you become healthier, you start walking more, use the car less, you do recreation, etc., etc. So what we try to do also in our models, because we have nice models to calculate those co-benefits, is to find the stakeholders from those different groups. So if there's health effects, I'm going to try to involve a health insurance company in financing this, because I'm saying, hey guys, with my project, I'm contributing to the health, so you will have less costs in the end. You should also have some interest maybe in financing this. So what this approach does a bit is to diversify possibly the sources of funders. That doesn't mean they will stay immediately like, yeah, no problem, we will pay. But that gives you a bit more, reach, if you will. And it's not immediately that you only have to look to the government for financing everything in the first time. Then you talked about maintenance. That's another issue. What is nice also about these multifunctional structures is that you have multiple users. So for instance, a dike will be typically maintained by, in our case, the water board, but at least some government agency that has to maintain it. But if I combine that, for instance, with houses or a recreation function, at least the grass will be cut, there's oversight, it won't become dirty because people take ownership. So for instance, that multifunctional dike, there's a union of volunteers that actually does a lot of the simple maintenance work that normally would be done by the municipality. In this way, when you get people involved, they also take ownership of the project and they will take some of that maintenance part. Obviously not the big upgrading and the actual maintenance of the dike body and the testing, but the superficial maintenance can be done in that way. So we try again. You're always a bit juggling a bit with financing and sources, but there are much more opportunities than if you would do this as standalone projects.
Okay, I'll continue the next ones, the next question, perhaps from regional and urban planning.
So democratic.
Yeah.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Firstly, thank you for Mr. Ali and Mr. William for the great presentations. We have one question. Based from the example that Mr. William has been presented about a park or maybe a road that can be used as a water storage, maybe because in Europe it's not as dense as Indonesia when it comes to the popularity, or also maybe the density of roads. So my question is that how can those concepts from the Netherlands that just been presented can be adapted in Indonesia? Thank you very much.
Again, the question of space, and I completely acknowledge that is in these types of areas much more difficult than in these wide cities that you might see in Europe. again, it's up to your creativity as a designer. We have, for instance, I've seen, and not always the cheapest solutions, but the combinations of parking garages and water storage, for instance. So yeah, to what extent can you integrate it in your buildings, under your buildings, etc. But I agree, it's not always an easy question. So you have to be creative. And one of the things where it is very important is when cities are starting to grow. So of course, here in Malang, we are already in a completely developed city. For a long time. But I am sure also in Indonesia you have secondary, smaller cities that are still growing, that are now still have quite a lot of space. But if I come back there in 5 years or in 10 years, I can't believe it's the same city. There are a lot of new buildings popped up. So there is the trick that you remember that graph that I showed you, that we don't make the same mistakes, we don't go through that cycle and have to repair the mistakes from the past. So if, especially in these cities, we claim already that space for water and climate, and we don't not let those cities fill up completely, at least in 20 years, I will not come to those cities and have to answer the same question. So I think, yeah, there we can still make a difference. Here it's really micromanagement, micro-design, finding a local solution everywhere that it's possible, because, yeah, you simply don't have the spatial liberty to do that else.
Yeah, also you can think on other aspects of like sponge cities or water sensitive cities. Because for example, one of the things that has been done in some cities is using the roads. Yeah, because if you have a very high flood, you can maybe close some roads and use them as water canals to get rid of the water, instead of keeping the water there and then stay there for a long time. So in the built cities, as William said, is much more difficult, but there are still some creative solutions to reduce the flood problem.
Okay, thanks. Because we have around 23 participants online, so I need one question from the online participant before we share attendance list. So one question from the online participant, please. You can, yeah, you can use raise hand buttons. There is sign in the chat one. That one is question or? Oh, that one is attendance list. But once again, I still need one question from the online participants, so I can make fair for everyone. It's not only offline participant, but also online participant. Once again, is there any question from the online participant? If there is no question from the online participant, I will give the second session a question from the offline participants. Participants, sorry. Okay, please. Yeah, once.
Thank you for the time. My name is Effendi. I'm from Water Resources Engineering Department. So my question is it water square can be applied in Indonesia? As we know, runoff in Indonesia is dirty, like sediment. So is water square still stand in Indonesia? If it can, what the qualification of water square can be applied in Indonesia? And we must to choose place like how to build it. Thank you.
I didn't hear it completely, but I think I heard enough. So first of all, are these water squares possible in Indonesia? And you were particularly concerned about the water quality aspects, right? And especially the sediments that come with it, etc. There are different types of water squares. So you can indeed have more slow water squares, these small urban wetlands where you use vegetation structures to literally clean the water. So that water will penetrate very slowly into the soil, be cleaned. You can capture the sediment with a sediment trap before that. So that technically is possible. Again, it will be a spatial question, because for those you need a bit more space, because you typically want to first capture your stormwater somewhere, then have the sediment trap, and then slowly drain it into your swale, your bio-infiltration unit to clean it before you can reuse it. So then you get back to that first question, or the very first question. do you have the space to do that? So that becomes already a bit more tricky. So again, you need to find the places where you can and where you can't. But technically, that is absolutely possible. So also with relatively polluted water, you can treat that quite well to be used at least as secondary water source. So I don't see a big problem there, even if there's metals, pucks in there and things like that.
Ali, you would like to add?
No, I think that was okay. So.
Okay. Okay, please, the second, yeah.
Thank you for the time for me. Thank you for Mr. Ali and Mr. William. I would like to ask about the concept of risk that Mr. Ali give lecture. The risk concept is about the success and the failure. But I want to ask about in Indonesia, maybe, I see a lot of people just do it. They do it, just do it. But without any managing about the risk. I'm saying I want to ask about how we create maybe or understand about the next level of managing risk with the unreasonable user or unreasonable design. I think that.
Thank you. It is actually a very, very interesting question. I think that even when we can just do it and we do things, maybe unconsciously we do some risk assessment because we suddenly don't jump off a cliff, for example. We do some risk assessment internally. But this, and also looking more towards the flood risk, there are two important concepts that we are facing with it all around the world. One is risk awareness, and the other one is risk communication. Yeah? So for a long, long time, people think that they are either safe or not. So there is no awareness of risk. We know that none of us are 100% safe at all time. So starting to make this awareness for people, this is a very important thing. And I think part of it is our responsibility to talk about it more and be able to communicate risk with public. To say, okay, what do we mean by risk? And the thing that you are accepting risk is not, it doesn't mean it's not equal that you have a lot of danger. Yeah? So we need to start talking about risk, increase risk awareness, and when we are designing a new thing or we are doing, for example, flood risk management, communicate the risk. Because, for example, I'm a coastal engineer, and in a lot of places, you see that people will go and build houses very close to the coast, which is very, very dangerous. Yeah? But if you have a kid and your kid goes to the beach and usually they think where to build their sandcastle, that water doesn't get to it. Yeah? But when we grow up, we forget about that concept. Yeah, we build our houses in a place that we wouldn't build our sandcastles when we were a kid. So this talking about risk, increasing risk awareness, and talking to people that, okay, if you are building your house there in a river valley, you are accepting so much risk. And if they are clear and they want to accept it, that's a different question. So risk awareness and risk communication are very important.
I only can add a little bit more, a cynical version of that to that. In the Netherlands, we have so-called water boards. These are government agencies, if you will, that have to take care of a lot of our water management issue, like the dikes. And one of the sayings they have already for a long time is, "Oh Lord, give us our daily bread, and once in a while a flood." And that means that people only start to build up awareness when a disaster happens. Then that's always a lesson. They need to be confronted with the actual danger to really be aware of risk. And there's this famous concept of the risk memory, that after 10 years, even after a big disaster, you have forgotten and you go back to the practices that you had before and forgot all about it. So yeah, it stays also a task for us, I would say, to continually keep interacting with everybody, not just in our scientific community, because then we're just talking to people, to our own, we preach to our own community, but we need to go out all the time and tell this story and engage with citizens. And that's the only thing we can do, I think.
Okay, thank you very much. We still have 4 minutes for a discussion session. Perhaps one question is sufficient. These are last questions before we end discussion sessions. No question anymore? Okay, Ali, as you said before that if we talk about future risk, we have to consider on a scenario. So in my opinion, that is kind of a pessimistic scenario and also optimistic scenario. And for optimistic one, actually there are so many options. How we can choose which one is the appropriate ones?
That is indeed a challenge that we have in everyday life. But, and also if you want to add to that question, is that we not only look at the hazard scenarios, for example, in case of flood, climate change scenarios, but we also need to look at the socio-economical pathways and socio-economical scenarios. So that's why we need to define a big range of scenarios. From very pessimistic to very optimistic ones, including all the dimension of the scenarios, and try to do risk assessment over the whole range. But then that gives us the different future possibilities. We don't know which one will happen. We may be able to put some probabilities or some likelihoods on them. So this is more probable, this is not more probable. But eventually, from that point onward, that is a decision, there is a decision of the community and also the available finances that which way you want to go and what you can postpone. And then if you want to go 1 degree further, based on those different scenarios, you can define different pathways of approaching the risk or doing the risk management. And then follow during the different years, you can monitor things and see which scenarios you are continuing. Because when we move like 5 years from now, those boundary or the bounds of scenarios may reduce based on the knowledge that we gain in the future. For example, if we are looking at the increased rain, we can say that maybe in 10 years we have 5% more or maybe we have 20% more. But in a few years from now, we can see which line we are and maybe we can move between these pathways. Thank you.
And to add to that, the good thing is we like to think we have to invent the wheel ourselves, but we don't need to think of all these scenarios. There are other people that do that for us. If you go to the insurance industry, if you go to big asset management, financial agency, if you go to McKinsey, they are developing these scenarios already also for their sectors. So we are not so used to that, but we should engage with them and they can help us with the scenarios that are also useful for us. So we're not alone in this. That's the message here.
Okay, thank you very much, Ali, and also William. Yeah, exactly 25 minutes for discussion sessions. Yeah, okay, I think we need to end our discussion session. But before I close this session, perhaps there is kind of a short closing remark from Ali and also from William. Closing remarks. Okay. Yeah, you can start first.
Okay, first, again, I want to thank you, everybody. Also the hospitality of the university in the last week that we were here. And for this specific lecture, if I want to have one take-home message, is that if you are thinking about flood risk management in the future, don't only think about reducing the flood, also think about reducing the consequences of the flood. Yeah? Because eventually the rain is coming and it's increasing. So let's try to find a way to float our house, maybe, to find a way to reduce the impact of the water and learn to live with water. Thank you.
Okay, two short comments from my side. First of all, maybe a message of hope in the sense that you are our hope. You are the new generation, also here in Indonesia, that has to build the country further and develop it. And it's nice to see here 3 different groups of people already: water resources, civil engineering, and planning together. And that's in a way that is also the future. I try to embody that future. My background is a bit strange. I come originally from urban design and planning. Then I studied, later on in my career, I reinvented myself. I studied artificial intelligence, computer science, and then I went into civil engineering and did my PhD there. And a lot of the, well, new concepts that we develop happen between the disciplines, are transdisciplinary. So we hope also that you guys are able to do that and come up and don't just stay in your own, talking only to your buddies from the same discipline, but really start interacting, and the new inventions come from there. And finally, also a question of maybe a bit of hope, but also of activism. You are also the new generation. If I look around me in the Netherlands, I see a lot of young people that are angry. Angry that we old people don't do anything about climate change, that we let things just continue and we are not enforcing change, and you need to do that. So when I see a young generation standing up, going to protest sometimes, I've been standing there with a lot of young people protesting for more action, climate action for instance. I feel, sometimes I feel very pessimistic, but then that gives me a lot of hope that there is a new generation standing up that demands change and are also taking action. So I hope you guys can also be proponents of that new generation and go for it. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you very much once again, Charlie, and also Williams. Just to remind to participants who join us online, don't forget to fill in the attendance list that committee already shared to you. And then this is end of our session, so please give a big applause for our speaker today. And of course for you, all participants online and offline. Mbak Maminarta, see you later. Over to Mbak Miko.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bambang. What a great session. Okay, please give a big applause to our 2 speakers and moderator. Okay, for Mr. Bambang and Mr. Dasgaib and Mr. Firvik, you may go back to your seat. Okay, watching you all participants, so enthusiastic, watching and listening and also asking things about managing coastal and pluvial flood risk in the cities. I believe what Mr. Verbeek said, our young people, young people must be take a very beneficial things for this guest lecture. And for token of our appreciation to our speakers, I would like to once again ask Mr. Ali to come forward and Mr. Indradi to come forward, and we have a memento to be given. Okay, please give a big applause. Okay, thank you. And Mr. Verbeek, please come forward and Mrs. Ismu, please come forward to give the memento to Mr. Verbeek. Okay. Thank you very much for the great insight and knowledge, which I believe it will be very beneficial for all of us who is attending this guest lecture online and offline. Okay, now we are nearing our end of the event, so I would like to ask all the lecturer and also the speakers to please stand up, and all of the participants too, please stand up too, and we will have a great photo session together. Okay, come to the center. Okay, yang belakang nanti kalau misalnya saya bilang 1, 2, 3 teriak teknik sama kepalkan tangan ke belakang ya. Oke, teriaknya yang kenceng, oke? Okay, I say to them, if I say 1, 2, 3, which is 1, 2, 3, please raise your fist like this and say technique, something like that. Okay, you may open your mask for a moment. Ya, boleh dibuka sebentar maskernya. Okay, please shout in the top of your lung. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Oh, nice. Okay, once again, 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you very much. You may go back to your seat. And oh, excuse me, one more. Okay. Okay. This the official pose, and it is silent. 1, 2, 3, cheese. Okay. 1, 2, 3, cheese. Okay. Once again, 1, 2, 3. Technique. Okay, shout in the top of your lung. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Technique. Wow, very nice. Okay, what a spirit. Okay, I like that. That's the spirit of the Faculty of Engineering, Universitas Brawijaya. Okay, and that will be marked to the end of the event. I really hope that our keynote speakers today enjoying this event as much as we are here in Malang, and besides enjoying the session, we also hope that you enjoy the Malang. I believe you'll enjoy the food, misters. Okay, now I representing all the committee. I really apologize for any inconvenience, and we really thankful for all of your insight and experience give it today, and I believe it will be very beneficial for us. Okay, and I have to close this meeting today as it reached our event today. Okay, I, Miko Irvandi, representing all the committee, please really appreciate all your comments today, and really pardon for any misconduct today. Okay? Have a really good, nice day. And wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon to all of us.
Located in the highland of Java Island, Malang City is well known as the City of Education, with its cool weather all year round, stunning natural attractions, and iconic historical buildings. In 1963, Universitas Brawijaya was established in Malang and has become one of the leading universities in Indonesia. As a part of Universitas Brawijaya, the Faculty of Engineering plays an important role in advancing the engineering field through education, research, and community service.
Faculty of Engineering, Universitas Brawijaya is armed with a global vision to become innovative, collaborative, and competitive to face challenges in the Industry 4.0 era. We provide higher level education with excellent quality to prepare graduates with eminent engineering skill, entrepreneurial skill, and of noble characters. Emphasizing the importance of global cooperation, we focus on contributing to the national development of the Republic of Indonesia and improving the living standard of people and humanity in general toward the achievement of Society 5.0.
To ensure harmonization between work units, achievement of optimal performance, and recognition at the national and international levels, the Faculty of Engineering always implements an implementation, evaluation, control, and continuous improvement of our programs in accordance with the national standards of higher education. We always ensure that the quality of education is excellent through targets of national and international accreditation. Currently, 88% of our undergraduate programs have been accredited A by BAN-PT, and 2 study programs have been internationally accredited from AUN-QA and IABEE. Every year, the Faculty of Engineering accepts around 1,300 students who will study at 8 undergraduate programs, 1 diploma program, 6 master programs, 3 doctoral programs, and 1 professional program. We have professors and associate professors among lecturers with excellent reputation in scientific research and publication. There are also 65 laboratories to support educational and research activities by the lecturers and students. We are committed to continuing to improve the competence of lecturers and students, especially in facing the era of digitalization. The 9 departments under the Faculty of Engineering are Civil Engineering Department, Mechanical Engineering Department, Water Resource Engineering Department, Electrical Engineering Department, Architecture Department, Urban and Regional Planning Department, Industrial Engineering Department, Chemical Engineering Department. Engineering Profession Program. The Faculty of Engineering provides facilities to support the academic atmosphere, including adequate classrooms, comfortable discussion rooms, libraries, worship places, canteens, sports centers, and student activity centers. We believe that the Faculty of Engineering will further develop through collaboration with various stakeholders, through student exchange programs, double degrees, split programs, visiting professors, research collaborations, and international conference collaborations. Every year, lecturer achievements in the form of patents for research innovations are increasing. Students have also made proud achievements at the national and international levels. With a spirit of innovation and collaboration, the Faculty of Engineering, Universitas Brawijaya, will work hard to present the best achievements for the sustainable development of the Republic of Indonesia.
1, 2, 3, teknik.
Visit us at www.technic.ub.ac.id.